My husband laughed and said, "What are you going to do, divorce me? I had just caught him with my own sister." I didn't say a single word. I simply walked into the bedroom and started packing a suitcase. They stopped laughing when they saw what I was putting inside. Hi everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I start my story, I'd love to know which city you're tuning in from. Please don't hesitate to share it in the comments. Now let me take you into this story. The day had been absolutely and painfully normal. I remember leaving the office around 5 p.m. feeling that familiar sense of satisfaction that comes with a productive week. I'm a partner at an architecture firm in Manhattan that I helped build from the ground up, and while the hours can be long, I love my job. There is a solidity to it, a permanence in creating spaces where people will live out their lives. It's a sense of control, I suppose. A feeling that I, too, was the architect of my own life. On my way home to the suburbs, I stopped at a gourmet market to pick up fresh pasta and a bottle of Napa Valley Cabernet. Jason loved it when I made my homemade bolognese. It was a small detail, but after 25 years of marriage, you learn that love often resides in the little things. It resides in knowing his favorite wine and making his favorite meal on a random Thursday, for no apparent reason. Our house was my sanctuary, a beautiful 2-story custom home I designed myself years ago, nestled in a quiet tree-lined neighborhood in Westchester County, New York. Every single detail, from the reclaimed oak floors to the Carrara marble in the kitchen, was something I had chosen with care. It was more than a house. It was a testament to the life I thought I had built. A permanent solidity. When I got home, Jason was already in the living room, supposedly reading the paper, but I could see his phone propped up behind it. "Hi, honey," I said, dropping my keys and grocery bags on the entryway console. "Smells like you took a shower." "Long day," he said, folding the newspaper with a rustle. "Wanted to wash it off." He walked over and gave me a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. It was routine, rehearsed, the kind of kiss that means nothing more than habit. We made dinner together, or rather, I cooked while he leaned against the kitchen island and told me about his day. His boss was a jerk. The quarterly reports were a nightmare. The usual complaints. I listened, offered sympathetic noises, and chopped onions. It was the familiar dance of our evenings, a choreography we had perfected over 2.5 decades. After dinner, we settled onto the living room couch. It was a plush, custom-made gray modular sofa that had taken me 6 months to choose. I remember thinking about that. The absurd amount of time I had invested in paint swatches and fabric samples, all to create this perfect, peaceful home. The gas fireplace was on just for ambiance, its soft orange light flickering over the framed photos on the mantel. Our wedding photos, him looking so handsome and nervous in his tuxedo. Photos from family vacations in Hawaii, our faces windburned and smiling. Photos of my little sister Chloe's graduation from NYU. Jason and I, standing on either side of her, beaming with pride. A whole life captured in polished silver frames. I was 52 years old. An age where you believe the foundations of your life are set in stone. You've weathered the storms, you've raised your hypothetical kids, and you've settled into the comfortable, predictable rhythm of a long marriage. You think you know the person sitting next to you better than the back of your own hand. I picked up an interior design magazine and Jason was on his phone. He was supposed to be looking up reviews for a new French restaurant to celebrate our anniversary. 25 years. A quarter of a century. It felt monumental, a milestone that deserved champagne and celebration. But he wasn't looking at restaurants. His phone vibrated a low, discreet buzz from inside his pocket. He pulled it out, and his movements were just a little too quick, a little too guarded. He tilted the screen away from me, a subtle shift of his body that screamed secrecy. It was a tiny thing, a hairline crack in the placid surface of our evening. But my architect's eye for detail, for things that are out of alignment, caught it immediately. Then he smiled. It wasn't his usual smile. It wasn't the tired end-of-the-day smile he gave me, or the polite, thin-lipped smile for the neighbors. This was a secret smile, a private, lit-from-within smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. My breath hitched. It was the smile he used to give me when we first started dating, back when a simple text from me could make him light up from across a crowded room. Seeing that smile now directed at a cold, glowing screen felt like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that knocked the wind out of me. Another vibration, more smiling. He started typing with both thumbs, brow furrowed in concentration, completely and utterly absorbed. The world outside, that little rectangle of light, the crackling fire, the soft background music, his wife of 25 years sitting 3 feet away, had ceased to exist for him. "Find anything good?" I asked, my voice sounding strained and artificially cheerful to my own ears. He jumped, startled as if he had forgotten I was even in the room. He quickly locked the phone and placed it face down on the cushion between us. "Oh, it's just an old college buddy, Mark." Sent me a funny meme about his kid. Something felt deeply wrong. A cold knot began to form in my stomach. Jason's college friends were my friends too. Mark always sent funny things to our old group chat, not to Jason personally in the middle of the night. But I let it go. You don't detonate a 5-year marriage over a text message. You tell yourself you're being paranoid, that it's your own insecurity talking. You tell yourself to trust him. So, I tried. I picked up my magazine, but the elegant floor plans and glossy photos just blurred on the page. I couldn't focus. All I could see was that smile, that specific, intimate smile that no longer belonged to me. I watched him out of the corner of my eye. This man I had shared a bed with for over 9,000 nights suddenly felt like a complete and utter stranger. The silence in the room grew heavy, pregnant with all the things left unsaid. The peaceful home I had designed to be my sanctuary suddenly felt like a stage set, fragile and fake, and I had the terrifying sensation that the curtain was about to fall. The knot in my stomach didn't go away. It stayed there through the night, a cold, hard lump of dread that made sleep impossible. I lay in our bed, listening to the sound of Jason's steady breathing beside me, and I felt a chasm opening up between us. Every time he shifted in his sleep, I flinched. I replayed the scene on the couch over and over in my head, analyzing every detail, every nuance, trying to convince myself I had imagined it, that I had overreacted. But the image of that smile was burned into my brain. The next day, Friday, I tried to bury myself in work. I went to the office, attended meetings about load-bearing walls and city zoning codes. I went through the motions of my normal, structured life, but it was like watching a movie of someone else's day. The little voice in my head kept whispering, kept replaying that secret smile. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I was a grown woman, a partner at a successful firm, not a hysterical, insecure teenager. But the feeling wouldn't leave. That night, the fragile piece I had tried to piece back together shattered forever. The evening started with a tense, almost suffocating normalcy. I suggested we order takeout, lacking the energy to cook. Jason agreed immediately, maybe a little too quickly. He seemed anxious to keep things simple, to avoid any real conversation. We ate in front of the TV, watching a mindless sitcom, the canned laughter filling the space where our own conversation should have been. After dinner, I was in the kitchen, rinsing the dishes. Jason was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone again. The same posture, the same intense concentration. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it meant nothing. His phone chimed. A loud, clear notification sound. This time he had left the volume on. He placed it face down on the granite counter, the screen dark, and said, "I'm gonna grab that good red wine from the pantry." He walked out of the kitchen. And in that moment, the universe, or fate, or whatever you want to call it, gave me a choice. I could respect his privacy. I could go back to my sink full of soapy water, dry the dishes, and live with the corrosive, lingering uncertainty for the rest of my life. Or I could know. I stood there for 10 long seconds, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could hear him rummaging in the pantry, humming a little tune. The sound was so normal, so domestic, it made the situation feel even more surreal. "Just flip it over, Sophia," the voice in my head urged. "You have to know." My hand trembled as I reached for the phone. It felt heavy, as if it held the weight of my entire future. The glass was cold and smooth against my skin. I took a deep, jagged breath and turned it over. The screen lit up, and there it was. A text message notification preview, clear as day. My brain registered the words before I could process the horror. "I can't stop thinking about last night. You were amazing." For a fraction of a second, my mind reeled, trying to make sense of it. An affair. He was having an affair. The pain was sharp, immediate, a red-hot poker to the chest. But it was the name below the message that made the world stop spinning. The name that turned the sharp pain into an implosion that crushed my soul and vaporized everything I thought I knew. It wasn't a name I didn't know. It wasn't a stranger, a coworker, some random woman I could hate from a distance. The name was Chloe. My sister. My little sister. The little girl whose scraped knees I had bandaged, the awkward teenager I had coached through her first date, the maid of honor at my wedding, who gave a tearful speech about how I was her hero. The woman whose picture was on my mantle, smiling her bright, beautiful smile right next to mine. I couldn't breathe. The air was sucked from my lungs like a vacuum. The sound of the running water in the sink faded into a dull, distant roar in my ears. I stared at the name, my sister's name, on my husband's phone next to those words. And my reality fractured into a million jagged pieces. It was no longer just a crack in the mirror. The mirror had shattered entirely. And the reflection, staring back at me, was of a woman I no longer recognized, living a life that was a complete and utter lie. I heard the pantry door open. I heard Jason walking back toward me, the wine bottle clinking against the corkscrew in his hand. He was still humming that little tune, completely and utterly oblivious, and I just stood there, frozen, holding the evidence of his unimaginable betrayal in my hand, the heat of the phone burning like a brand against my palm. Time seemed to slow to a thick, syrupy crawl. I could feel the cold of the granite counter seeping into my fingertips where I gripped the edge to keep myself upright. Jason stopped humming when he saw my face. The casual smile dropped from his lips. "Sophia, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I tried to speak, but no sound came out. My throat had closed up. I simply turned the phone around, my hand shaking so violently the screen seemed to vibrate, and showed it to him. His eyes darted to the screen. I watched his face desperately, looking for any sign of remorse, of panic, of shame. There was nothing. I saw a flash of annoyance quickly masked. He looked like a teenager who had just been caught missing curfew, not a man who had just dynamited his 25-year marriage. He let out a long, theatrical sigh. "Look, it's not what you think." The sheer insulting weakness of that cliché, the most pathetic line in the cheater's playbook, finally broke my paralysis. "Not what I think." My voice was a choked, raspy whisper I barely recognized as my own. "It says, Chloe. My Chloe. And it says, you were amazing last night." Every word was a shard of glass I had to force out of my throat. He had the audacity to look bored. "Put out." He gently took the phone from my shaking hand and slid it into his pocket, as if hiding the evidence made it disappear. "You're overreacting. You're being dramatic." "Dramatic," I whispered. Just then the mudroom door clicked open, and Chloe walked in. She was carrying a box from the local bakery, a bright, cheerful smile plastered on her face. "Hey, I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd bring dessert. They had that lemon meringue pie you love, Soph." She used my childhood nickname, and the sound of it on her lips now felt like a desecration. Her smile faltered as she took in the scene. She looked from my ashen face to Jason's tense posture, a quick, calculating glance between the two of us. And, in that single, fleeting look, I saw it all. There was no surprise, no confusion, only recognition. She knew. Of course she knew. She wasn't an innocent party caught in the crossfire. She was the other combatant. I looked at my little sister, the woman whose secrets I had kept, whose tears I had dried, whose life I had celebrated as if it were my own. "Chloe," I whispered the name, tasting like ash and poison in my mouth. She didn't even try to deny it. She leaned against the doorframe, setting the bakery box on the counter. A slow, satisfied smirk played on her lips. She looked at Jason, and he looked at her, and a silent, triumphant conversation passed between them. And then the thing happened that broke me. The thing that killed the last ounce of hope in my heart. Jason started to laugh. It wasn't a small, nervous chuckle. It was a full, deep belly laugh. A laugh of pure, unadulterated mockery of relief because the secret was finally out. Chloe joined in a sharp, tinkling laugh that sounded like breaking glass. They stood there, in my kitchen, my husband and my sister, laughing at my pain. Laughing at the total destruction of my world. The sound echoed off my pristine marble countertops, a grotesque symphony of their shared betrayal. The blood drained from my face. I felt a strange, horrifying sense of detachment, as if I were floating near the ceiling watching this obscene little play unfold below. The woman standing there with a face like a mask of silent horror couldn't be me. Through his laughter, Jason finally managed to speak, wiping a tear of mirth from the corner of his eye. The words he said will be etched into my memory, branded onto my soul until my dying day. "Oh, come on, Sophia," he panted, still chuckling. "It's not that big a deal. What are you gonna do? Divorce me?" And in that moment, with his cruel laughter ringing in my ears, something inside me didn't just break, it died. The loving wife, the trusting sister, the woman who had built her life around these two people, ceased to exist. She turned to dust and blew away in the wind. And in her place something cold, hard, and silent began to form like a diamond under unimaginable pressure. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the heavy cast-iron skillet at his head, even though the image flashed through my mind with vivid clarity. I just stood there like an empty shell. The laughter finally died down, turning into an awkward silence as they realized I wasn't reacting. They looked at me a little confused now, their shared amusement giving way to a flicker of uneasy uncertainty. "Sophia, say something," Jason said, his tone still light but with an underlying edge of command. He was used to me reacting to us talking things out. My silence was a variable he hadn't anticipated. I didn't. I turned my back to them, a simple, deliberate movement. I walked out of the kitchen. I crossed the dining room past the long mahogany table where we had hosted so many family Thanksgivings, and started walking up the grand, curved staircase. Every step on the plush carpet felt heavy, monumental. I could hear them following me, their footsteps hesitant on the hardwood floor below. "Where are you going? We're talking about this," Jason yelled up at me, a note of panic creeping into his voice. But we weren't talking. They were laughing. I was done talking forever. I walked into our bedroom. Our bedroom. The place that had been my sanctuary. The king-size bed with the ridiculously high thread count sheets I had insisted on. The matching walnut nightstands. The life we had built contained within those four walls. I went straight to the walk-in closet, a space I had designed to be organized and serene. On the top shelf, covered in a canvas dust bag, was a set of hand-stitched Italian leather luggage. I had bought them for Jason for our 20th anniversary for that trip to Italy we took. He had loved them, showing them off to anyone who would listen. I pulled down the largest suitcase. It was heavy, beautifully made, a symbol of our shared history of our travels, of our life together. I placed it on the pristine white duvet of our bed and unzipped it with a firm, decisive pull. They were standing in the doorway, now watching me, their expressions a bizarre mix of apprehension and lingering arrogance. "What are you doing?" Chloe asked, her voice tinged with mocking curiosity. "Packing his bags, kicking him out, a bit dramatic. Don't you think I ignored her?" I went to my side of the closet. My clothes hung in neat rows, organized by color and season. My silk blouses, my work suits, the beautiful cocktail dress I wore for date nights, nights that had apparently been a complete and utter lie. With a strange, detached calm, I began taking them off the hangers. One by one, I folded them carefully, my hands moving with an eerie precision, smoothing out the wrinkles, and placed them inside the suitcase. His suitcase. The dress I wore to my father's funeral. The cashmere sweater he gave me for Christmas 5 years ago. Every item was a memory, a piece of our shared history. And I was packing it all away. The silence in the room stretched thick and suffocating. The only sound was the soft rustle of fabric, the quiet click of wooden hangers. Their amusement was fading fast, replaced by a dawning, horrified realization. Chloe was the first to finally process what she was seeing. Her voice was a sharp, incredulous hiss. "Wait, are you packing your clothes?" Into his bag I kept packing. My favorite workout gear, my comfortable jeans, it all went in. I was a methodical, silent machine. The cold, hard diamond of resolve inside me was in control. It was directing my hands, my feet, my every movement. They wanted to see what I would do. I was going to show them, and I wasn't going to say a single word while doing it. His panic was palpable now, a frantic energy radiating from the doorway. "Sophia, stop it. This is childish." "It's not funny," Jason said, his voice taking on a higher, more authoritative pitch. The laughter was a distant memory, replaced by the nervous bluster of a man realizing too late that he had fundamentally miscalculated. He had expected tears, screaming, maybe a plate thrown at the wall. He hadn't anticipated this cold, silent, methodical dismantling of his life. I ignored him. After packing my essential clothes, I walked into the spacious master bathroom. I grabbed my toiletries from the marble vanity, my expensive La Mer face cream. He always complained about the price of. My Chanel perfume he bought me for my 50th birthday, my electric toothbrush. Everything went into a travel bag, and then into the suitcase. They just stood there, staring, two useless statues of flesh and bone. My silence was a reinforced concrete wall they couldn't penetrate. I zipped up the large suitcase with a final satisfying pull and set it on the floor. Then I went back to the closet and pulled down the matching leather weekend duffel, the beautiful bag we had used for weekend getaways to Napa. "Hello, Earth," to Sophia. "Are you seriously giving me the silent treatment?" Jason's voice was getting louder, almost a shout. "Okay, I screwed up. It's bad. I get it. But you can't do this. You can't throw away a family. Our family. You set fire to our family and used the flames to keep yourself warm, I thought, as I started packing my shoes. I packed my laptop, my work files, the antique silver photo frame from my desk that held a picture of my parents. As I was packing, I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed where I had slept trustingly next to a liar for who knows how long, and pulled out my phone. My fingers were surprisingly steady. Jason and Chloe exchanged a nervous glance. "What are you doing on your phone now?" Chloe demanded, her voice shrill. I opened my banking app. It was a blessing, really. A stroke of karmic justice that I had always been the one to manage our finances. I was the architect, the planner, the one who managed the investments and paid the bills. The house was in my name. I had put the down payment on it using a small inheritance from my grandmother. Most of our assets, the cars, the brokerage account, the emergency fund, were all tied to my accounts to my salary. I scrolled to the list of authorized users on my American Express Platinum card. There was his name, Jason C. Torres. I remembered how excited he was when I added him, how he had flaunted the heavy metal card to his buddies at the country club. With a simple tap, a confirmation screen popped up. "Are you sure you want to remove this user?" I hit confirm without a second of hesitation. A tiny digital guillotine. Next, the car insurance. The policy for the Audi Q5 he drove with such pride, the one he considered his car was under my name as part of my multi-vehicle discount plan. I found the number in my contacts and called, putting the phone on speaker. The cheerful, repetitive hold, music a generic, smooth jazz tune, filled the tense silence of the room. Jason stared at the phone in my lap, his face pale, his jaw dropping. "Thank you for calling State Farm. This is Mary speaking. How can I help you today?" "Hi, Mary," I said. My voice was even and calm, the voice of a stranger. "I'd like to make a change to my policy. My policy number is 947. I gave her the details. "I need to remove the Audi and the primary driver, Jason Torres." "Sophia, you can't do that." Jason finally sputtered, rushing forward. "I need that car for work for clients. Ma'am, the change will take effect immediately," the agent chirped on the other end, oblivious to the situation. "The vehicle and driver have been removed. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" "No, thank you, Mary. You've been very helpful," I said, and hung up. I looked up at him. His face was a mask of disbelief and impotent rage. Did you just cancel my insurance?" I didn't answer. I simply went back to my phone, opened our AT&T app, and with a few more taps began the process of removing his line from my family plan. His phone would be disconnected at the next billing cycle. One by one, I was severing the cords that tied him to my life and, more importantly, to my finances. I changed the password to our Amazon Prime account. I changed the Netflix password. I logged into the smart home app and revoked his access to the ADT security system. Little digital acts of eviction. And with every tap, I felt a piece of my power returning. The expression on their faces was a grotesque mix of panic and sputtering indignation. Chloe, who had been watching in silence with a look of smug superiority, now looked genuinely frightened. The foundations of the comfortable, subsidized life she was trying to insert herself into were being demolished right before her eyes. "This is insane," Jason stammered, running a hand through his thinning hair. "You're throwing away 25 years of marriage over some stupid texts. Some stupid texts." My voice was dangerously low, a growl that came from the depths of my shattered soul. It was the first time I had spoken directly to him in what felt like an eternity. The cold diamond of resolve inside me was heating up, turning into a white, focused rage. "Give me your phone." "What?" "No," he said, clutching it protectively to his chest like a child with a toy. "Jason," I said, my voice leaving absolutely no room for argument or negotiation. "You can give it to me right now, or I will consider that a full and complete confession, and my lawyer will subpoena it in the divorce proceedings. And believe me, it will look much, much worse for you. So you choose." I knew using those words would get his attention. It did. He hesitated, his jaw clenched in fury, and then practically threw the phone at me. It landed softly on the duvet. I picked it up. I unlocked it. The passcode was 1125. The birthday of our first dog, a goofy golden retriever named Luna, who had died 10 years ago. He hadn't even bothered to change it. The intimacy of that knowledge, the shared secret of that number, now felt like a violation. I opened his messages with Chloe. It wasn't just a few texts. It was a novel, an epic saga of deceit. It went back months. I scrolled and scrolled, my heart turning into a block of ice in my chest. The sheer volume of their communication was staggering. Good morning texts, good night texts, flirty banter during the workday. Then there were the pictures, photos of my sister in lingerie I had never seen, posing suggestively in what looked like a hotel room. Photos that made my stomach churn. There were inside jokes, cruel nicknames for me, vile comments about my work, my friends, my body. They had built an entire secret world, and the foundation of that world was their shared contempt for me. Then, I found it. The thread from last month. Jason had told me he was going on a business trip, a sales conference in Chicago. I had helped him pack his bag. I had driven him to JFK at 5 inches the morning. I had texted him every night telling him I missed him. It was all a lie. The messages laid it out in nauseating, pornographic detail. It was a romantic getaway with Chloe. She had flown out to meet him. They had stayed at a luxury 5-star resort down in Cabo San Lucas. And the worst part, the final soul-crushing blow I found, the email confirmation he had forwarded to her. The one with the final folio. It had been paid for with my American Express card. The one I had just canceled. The trip had cost over $7, $500. My hands were shaking now, not from weakness but from pure, unadulterated fury. I looked up from the screen, my eyes locking onto his. Both of them looked away, unable to hold my gaze. I decided to read one of the messages out loud, my voice dripping with venom. Does she suspect anything, worried she might check the credit card statement? I paused, letting the words hang in the air like toxic smoke. No clue. She's too busy running her little empire to notice me. Besides, she thinks my promotion is right around the corner, so she won't question any expenses right now. She's predictable. My little empire. The business I had built from the ground up with sleepless nights and weekends sacrificed on the altar of his success. The business that paid for this house, for his Audi, for his country club membership, for his secret, sordid vacations. The rage was so intense, I felt like I might spontaneously combust. You took my money, I said, my voice trembling with the effort of keeping it level, to take my sister on vacation, while you lied to my face about a promotion that wasn't even real. Jason had the nerve to look ashamed for a fleeting second. Chloe, however, simply crossed her arms, her chin tilting up in defiance. He deserved a little fun, she said, her voice dripping with poison. You've been so wrapped up in your work for years. You barely pay attention to him. What did you expect? That was it. The final, unforgivable betrayal. Not just the affair, not just the theft, but the justification. The blame. In their twisted, selfish minds, this was somehow my fault. The last vestiges of love, of history, of familial connection I held for either of them evaporated in that moment, replaced by nothing but a vast, empty expanse of contempt. I felt a strange, chilling clarity. The path forward, which had been a chaotic mess of pain and confusion moments before, was now illuminated by the hard, bright fire of my anger. There was nothing left to save here, and nothing left to say to these two monstrously selfish people. I closed his phone and tossed it onto the bed. Then I pulled out my own phone again for the last time in this house. My fingers flew across the screen, my movements efficient and precise. Now what? Jason asked, his voice weary, like he was talking to a wild animal he wasn't sure would attack. Who are you calling now? I didn't answer him. I called my best friend, Emily. We had been friends since college. We had supported each other through everything. She answered on the second ring. Hey Soph, what's up? Her cheerful, familiar voice came through the speaker, a lifeline to the sane world. Emily, I said, and my voice finally broke. Just for a second. A single crack in the facade of ice. Can I come stay with you for a few days? I need to get out of here. The cheer vanished from her voice, replaced by immediate, urgent concern. Oh my God, of course. What happened? Are you okay? Where are you? I'm at home, I said, looking directly at Jason as the words left my mouth. Jason has been cheating on me with Chloe. There was a stunned, horrified silence on the other end of the line, followed by a string of curses that almost made me smile. That absolute bastard. That snake. Of course you can stay. Don't even ask. I'm coming to get you right now. No, I said quickly. Don't come here. I don't want you in this house with them. I'm leaving now. I'll grab an Uber. Okay. Okay, honey. The guest room is always ready for you, you know that. The door will be unlocked. Get here safe. And Soph, call me the second you're in that car. I will. Thank you, I whispered and hung up. Next, I opened the Uber app. I put in Emily's address. The map showed a black SUV icon just a few blocks away. 5 minutes. The reality of the situation, its finality finally seemed to crash down on them. This wasn't a temporary dramatic gesture. It wasn't a tantrum. I was actually truly leaving. "Wait, you can't just leave," Chloe yelled, her defiance crumbling into a pathetic childish whine. "This is your house." "Exactly," I said, my voice ice cold again. "It is my house. That's why I'm the one who gets to walk out of it. You two can stay here for now." Jason moved to block the door, planting his feet like a sentry. "Sophia, please. Let's sit down and talk about this like adults. We can. We can fix this. I know we can. We can go to therapy." Therapy. I let out a laugh, a bitter, humorless sound that was more like a bark. "You think a 60-minute session with a therapist can fix this? You think we can talk our way out of this? There is nothing to fix. A marriage, a relationship, those are structures that can be repaired. But this is a toxic waste dump. And I am evacuating." My phone buzzed. My Uber was outside. I grabbed the handles of the 2 heavy leather suitcases. They were full of the curated pieces of the life I thought I had. A life that was now nothing but dead weight. I started rolling them toward the bedroom door. They both lunged, trying to stop me. Chloe grabbed one of the suitcases, wrestling with the zipper. "You're not going anywhere. We have to talk." Jason put his hands on my shoulders, his grip surprisingly strong. "Sophia, please. Don't do this. Think about what you're throwing away." I stopped. I looked at his hands on my shoulders, the hands of a stranger. Then I looked up at his face, a face I no longer recognized. Then I looked at my sister, who was desperately trying to unpack my shoes as if that would somehow keep me there. I felt a wave of disgust so profound I almost gagged. I shoved his hands off me with a force that surprised even me. I looked at them both. These 2 people who had been the twin pillars of my universe, now just pathetic, selfish strangers standing amidst the rubble they had created. "You asked me what I was going to do," I said, my voice steady, clear, and final. "I'm going to live without either of you." And with that, I rolled my suitcases past them. I walked down the grand staircase and out the heavy oak front door of my house for the very last time. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. The cool night air hit my face like a slap, bringing me back into my own body. The Uber, an immaculate black Suburban, was idling by the curb. The driver, a kind-faced man with graying temples and a gentle smile, stepped out immediately when he saw me struggling with the heavy bags. "Allow me, ma'am. I've got it," he said softly. He expertly lifted the bags and placed them in the trunk. He must have seen the look on my face, the tear tracks on my cheeks, the tremor in my hands, because he didn't ask any questions. He simply opened the back door for me and gave me a single sympathetic nod. The moment I slid into the back seat and the door clicked shut, the adrenaline that had been coursing through my veins for the past hour vanished, as if someone had flipped a switch. It left behind a hollow, cavernous emptiness that was almost worse than the rage. The car pulled away from the curb and I watched my beautiful house with its perfectly manicured lawn and the cozy gas lanterns I had installed last year recede into the darkness. My home, my sanctuary, and they were still inside it. The thought was a physical violation. Then, my phone, which I was still clutching with white knuckles, started blowing up. First, it was Jason. The screen lit up with his name and picture a photo of us in Napa Valley smiling a lifetime ago. I stared at it, then pressed the red button to decline the call with a vicious swipe of my thumb. A second later, a text popped up. "Sophia, pick up the phone. This is crazy. You're acting like a child." I ignored it. Then Chloe. Her name flashed, and a fresh wave of nausea and betrayal washed over me. I declined her call too. A barrage of texts followed one after another, rapid fire. "You can't do this to us. You're abandoning your family. You're destroying everything with your selfishness." I was destroying everything. The sheer staggering audacity of it was almost impressive. The phone kept buzzing, vibrating against my leg. A relentless electronic tether to the 2 people I now despised more than anyone on earth. It felt like they were trying to pull me back, to drag me back into the toxicity and the lies through that little glowing device. Jason called again. This time, a voicemail notification popped up. Then Chloe. Then Jason again. I watched the screen light up with their names flashing in the dark car like warning signals. With 2 decisive taps, I found their contacts and blocked them both. The buzzing stopped. The silence in the car was suddenly deafening, broken only by the soft hum of tires on the asphalt. And in that stillness, as the familiar streetlights of my neighborhood blurred past the window, it finally hit me. The tectonic, crushing weight of it all. 25 years of marriage, 50 years of sisterhood, gone. Vaporized in a single night of cruel laughter and breathtaking betrayal. I looked out the window at the blurry lights of other people's houses, other people's normal lives, and realized that silent tears were streaming down my face again, the salt stinging the raw skin of my cheeks. I wasn't sobbing. It was a quiet, desperate kind of crying for a life that was now over, for a future that had been stolen from me. The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror, his expression full of concern. "Everything all right back there, ma'am?" he asked quietly. I couldn't find my voice to reply, so I just gave a small, pathetic nod. Then I whispered, mostly to myself, a promise to the broken woman reflected in the glass. "It will be." And in the quiet of that car, with my whole world packed into a suitcase that wasn't even mine, I felt completely and utterly alone. But telling this story, sharing this with you, makes me feel a little less lonely. If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. That way I'll know you're my amazing supporters, and I'll know you're with me on this journey. Your support is an incredible encouragement to me. Please comment the number 1 so I can recognize you. And now please listen as I continue my story. The first night at Emily's house was a blur of shock and exhaustion. She met me at the door, wrapped me in a massive hug, and didn't let go for a full minute. She didn't press me for details. She didn't ask a million questions. She just guided me to her guest room, a cozy safe space, and brought me a cup of tea and a Xanax. I think I slept, but it was a restless, nightmare-filled sleep, haunted by the sound of their laughter. I woke up Saturday morning feeling like I had been in a car crash. Every part of me ached, but the cold core of resolve inside me was still there. It had hardened overnight into something unbreakable. Emily was my rock. She sat with me at her kitchen table while I stared blankly at a mug of coffee, and when I was ready, she didn't offer platitudes. She offered a plan. "All right," she said, her voice firm. "What's step 1? "A lawyer," I said, my own voice surprising me with its steadiness. "Not just any lawyer. The best, most ruthless divorce attorney in the city." Emily nodded, already typing on her laptop. "I know a guy. They call him the Shark. He handled my cousin's messy divorce." By 9 a.m. on Monday, I was sitting in the sterile, over-air-conditioned office of Arthur Pierce, a man with a thick head of white hair, piercing blue eyes, and the reputation of being a great white in a $3,000 suit. I needed a shark. His office was on the 40th floor, with a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline I had helped build. I felt a small, grim sense of irony. I told him everything. I laid it all out on the polished surface of his mahogany desk. The 5-year marriage. The fact that I was the primary breadwinner with the documentation to prove it, the house in my name bought with my inheritance. I explained the financial entanglement, the cars, the accounts. Then I told him about Jason and Chloe and the events of Thursday night. I had saved the text messages from their phones and the unblocked numbers. I played him the voicemails they had started, leaving a pathetic, chaotic mix of feigned remorse, furious accusations, and desperate pleading. "Mr. Oh." Pierce listened patiently, his face impassive, taking occasional notes on a yellow legal pad. He didn't interrupt. When I finally finished my throat raw, he took off his gold-rimmed glasses and wiped them slowly with a silk cloth. "Well, Sophia," he said, his voice quiet and deeply reassuring. "This is a mess. A heartbreaking, despicable mess. But from a legal standpoint, it is remarkably clean." He confirmed what I already suspected. Since I was the sole owner on the deed to the house, Jason and Chloe were, in legal terms, at-will occupants. With no lease, they were my guests, and their invitation had been thoroughly revoked. "We will initiate divorce proceedings immediately, citing adultery and cruel and inhuman treatment," he explained, his tone crisp and professional. "We will also file an emergency motion to freeze any joint assets, though it seems there are very few. And most importantly, we will have them served with a formal, legally binding notice to quit. An eviction notice." "Exactly. They will have 30 days to vacate your property. If they refuse, we will have them removed by the sheriff's department." The words felt both terrifying and empowering. Eviction. Sheriff's department. This was real. This was the mechanism of my freedom. He drafted the documents right then and there, his paralegal springing into action. The formal notice was sent out with a process server that very afternoon. I paid the rush fee to have it delivered immediately. I imagined the scene. A stern-looking stranger showing up at the door of my beautiful home and handing them the cold, crisp legal documents demanding they leave. Their reaction was immediate and nuclear. My phone, which had been blissfully silent since I blocked them, began vibrating with notifications from unknown numbers and newly created email addresses. They had resorted to new tactics to bypass my blocks. The emails were a torrent of rage and delusion. From Jason, using a new Gmail account. An eviction notice. After everything I've given to this family, after all the support I've given your career, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. You can't throw me out on the street just like that. I have rights. From Chloe, from an equally new account. You are a cold, heartless monster. I am your sister. I have tenant rights. I'm not going anywhere. This is my house too now. I forwarded every single message to Mr. Pierce with a simple note for his files. He replied almost instantly, "Excellent. Every message is another nail in their coffin. Keep documenting everything." The battle lines had been drawn. They thought they could intimidate me, that they could bully me into caving with empty threats. They had forgotten who they were dealing with. They had forgotten that I was the one who built the empire they were so comfortably squatting in. And I was about to remind them, with the full force of the law on my side. I knew it was coming. I had dreaded it more than the confrontation with Jason and Chloe, more than the meeting with the lawyer, the phone call. It came on a Saturday morning, a week after I left. I was at Emily's kitchen table sketching designs for a new project on a drafting pad, trying to find some semblance of normalcy in the meticulous ordered world of lines and angles. The phone rang and the caller ID showed a number I knew as well as my own mom. My hand hovered over the phone. A part of me, the wounded child part, wanted to just let it ring, to retreat into the safe cocoon of silence. I was building around my shattered heart. But the architect in me, the part that faces problems head-on, knew I couldn't. I had to face this. I took a deep breath to steel myself and answered. "Hi, Mom." "Sophia, thank God." Her voice was frantic, breathless, laced with a manufactured drama I knew all too well. "I've been calling and calling. Chloe finally told me what happened. She said you had some kind of nervous breakdown, a horrible misunderstanding, and that you threw them out of the house. A nervous breakdown, a misunderstanding." That was the story they were spinning. Of course, it painted me as the unstable one, them as the victims. It was masterful in its cruelty. "That's not what happened, Mom," I said, my voice tired, lacking the energy for this fight. "Sophia, how could you do this?" she barreled on, not listening, a tidal wave of guilt. "He is your husband of 25 years, and Chloe." "For God's sake, Sophia, she's your sister." "Your little sister," she called me, sobbing. She said she has nowhere to go. You can't throw your own sister out on the street. The sheer injustice of it felt like a physical blow. The fact that her first concern was for the perpetrator, not the victim. "Mom," I said, my voice growing colder. "Did they tell you why I left? Did they tell you I walked in on them? That they've been having an affair for months behind my back? In my house, spending my money." There was a pause. A brief, telling silence. I could hear her take a shaky breath. Well, she finally said, her voice softer but still tinged with reproach. "Chloe said it was a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. She feels awful. People make mistakes, Sophia. Good people. Family is supposed to forgive. You can't throw away a 2-5-year marriage and your relationship with your sister over a mistake." "A mistake." I repeated the word, my voice dangerously quiet. "Mom, it wasn't a mistake. It was hundreds of mistakes. Hundreds of lies, every single day. And when I confronted them, they laughed in my face. They stood in my kitchen and laughed. Chloe is very fragile right now," my mother continued, her voice taking on a whining, pleading tone I despised. "She's always looked up to you, and Jason is your husband. For better or for worse, remember your vows. You owe it to your family, to your father's memory, to try and fix this." That was the trigger word. "Oh, I don't owe them a damn thing," I said, my voice now like ice. "I have given them everything for years. I paid Chloe's grad school application fees. I gave Jason an interest-free loan to start his failed consulting business. I paid for their secret vacations. What I owe to myself. I owe it to myself not to be a doormat, not to be a fool, and not to let my home be a brothel for my husband and my sister. They have 30 days to find a new place to live. That's more generosity than they deserve." I could hear her start to cry on the other end, the wet hitching sobs of someone who isn't getting their way. "You're destroying this family, Sophia. "You're being so selfish." "No, Mom," I said, the very last ounce of hope I had for her maternal protection dying in my heart. "I'm not. They already did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess." I ended the call. I sat in the silence of Emily's sunny kitchen, the drafting pad with my neat, ordered designs mocking me from the table. I realized with a profound, aching clarity that I hadn't just lost a husband and a sister. In a way, I had lost my mother, too. Her loyalty I now saw wasn't to her daughters, but to the fragile, idealized image of a perfect family she wanted to project to the world. And I had just shattered that image. I was truly, completely on my own. The next 2 weeks were a strange, surreal limbo. I lived at Emily's house working remotely and trying to carve out a new routine. Emily was a saint, giving me space when I needed it and forcing me to eat when I forgot. The days were a blur of legal emails, conference calls, and long, aimless walks. The nights were the hardest, filled with a suffocating loneliness. Meanwhile, Jason and Chloe's campaign of desperation intensified. Having failed to break me with my mother's emotional blackmail, they pivoted to a campaign of petty, irritating harassment. It started with the finances. I got another fraud alert, this time from my brokerage account. Someone had tried to log in and initiate a wire transfer. The security protocols I had set up with my financial advisor held firm, and the attempt was blocked. I knew it was Jason. He was testing the fences, looking for a weak spot. Then came the social media smear campaign. Chloe, who had always been obsessed with her online image, posted a long, rambling, tear-jerking essay on Facebook. She was crafty. She didn't mention the affair, of course. She painted a picture of a concerned, heartbroken sister worried about her older sister's sudden, alarming mental instability. She claimed I had become paranoid and delusional, that I was under extreme stress from work, and that I had kicked them out on the street based on a terrible misunderstanding. She ended the post with a plea for her friends to pray for me and my healing. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive victimhood. My phone started buzzing with texts from distant relatives and old family friends, all expressing their concern. "Is everything okay, Soph? Heard. You're going through a tough time. Chloe is so worried about you. Normally I don't engage in social media drama. It's beneath me. But this was a calculated attack on my sanity and my reputation. It required a response." I didn't write a long post. I didn't get into a war of words. I simply went to her post and left a single public comment. Ask him about the business conference at the luxury resort in Cabo last month. Then ask him who paid for it. I have the credit card receipts charged to my account. Seems like misunderstandings are getting pretty expensive these days. The comment section exploded. People started asking questions. Within an hour, Chloe's entire post and all the comments had been deleted. But they weren't done. The pettiness escalated to the bizarre. My weekly Whole Foods grocery delivery was mysteriously canceled. My subscription to the New York Times was suspended for non-payment even though it was on autopay. A dozen pizzas showed up at Emily's door one night, ordered under my name. Small, incredibly childish things designed to disrupt my life and get under my skin. Every time I quietly fixed the problem. I called the credit card company and disputed the pizza charges. I reinstated subscriptions with new payment info. And I documented all of it. Every canceled subscription, every fraudulent pizza order, every manipulative social media post. I created an email folder and sent a summary to Mr. Pierce every night. His replies were always brief and encouraging. "This is excellent. They are building our case for us." They thought they were harassing me into submission. What they were actually doing was methodically documenting their own instability and malice. They were so blinded by their own entitlement and rage that they couldn't see they were no longer fighting me. They were fighting themselves, and they were losing spectacularly. Every petty act was another shovelful of dirt on their own graves. The harassment was a constant low-level hum of stress in the background of my life. I was growing numb to it, learning to treat it as a logistical problem to solve rather than an emotional assault. I was focusing on my own path forward. I spent my days at Emily's working, and I started looking at new apartments online, scrolling through listings for smaller, brighter places just for me. The idea of starting over at 52 was terrifying, but with every passing day it also felt increasingly like a necessary, exhilarating liberation. Then, they crossed a line. A bright red, irrevocable line from which there was no return. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was on a conference call for work when an email popped up on my screen. It was from my primary bank, the one that held my mortgage and main checking account. The subject line was innocuous, "Update on your recent application." I frowned. I hadn't applied for anything. I opened the email. It was a standard automated message. "Congratulations on your new auto loan," it read cheerfully. I stared at the screen, the blood turning to ice water in my veins. The voices on my conference call faded into a distant, meaningless buzz. I hadn't applied for a car loan. With shaking hands, I clicked the link in the email. It took me to a loan document. There it was in black and white, an application for a $65,000 loan for a brand new Audi Q5. The exact model Jason had been complaining he wanted for months. It had been submitted online using my full name, my address, my date of birth, and my social security number, and because of my excellent credit history, it had been approved instantly. I felt like I was going to throw up. This was no longer pettiness. It wasn't childish harassment. This was a felony. This was criminal calculated identity theft. They were trying to saddle me with crippling debt, to ruin the financial stability I had worked my entire life to build. I excused myself from the conference call, my voice a strained whisper. I immediately called the bank's fraud department. The woman on the other end, a calm professional named Linda, listened patiently as I frantically explained the situation, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and fear. "Yes, ma'am, I see the application right here," she said after a few moments of typing. "It was submitted this morning from an IP address linked to your home Wi-Fi network." Of course it was. They had used my own internet service, the one I paid for, to commit a crime against me. The audacity was simply unbelievable. Linda immediately froze the loan and opened a high-priority investigation. But I knew I couldn't stop there. This was no longer just a messy, painful divorce. It had escalated to something far more dangerous. With a heavy heart and a sense of grim finality, I did something I never in my worst nightmares thought I would do. I picked up the phone and called the local police precinct. I asked to file a formal report for identity theft and aggravated wire fraud against my husband, Jason Torres, and my sister, Chloe Martin. I had to go down to the station. I sat in a sterile, uncomfortable plastic chair under flickering fluorescent lights and told the whole sordid story to a tired-looking detective named Mitchell. I had to give him my ID, my social security number, all the intimate details of my life they had stolen and twisted for their own gain. I showed him the emails, the eviction notice, the loan application. Detective Mitchell was surprisingly kind, his eyes full of a weary sympathy. "Ma'am," he said when I finished leaning back in his squeaky chair, "you did the right thing. We see this kind of stuff, financial abuse, coercive control, more than you'd think in contentious separations. You've handed us a very clear motive and a digital paper trail to follow. We'll open an investigation immediately." When I walked out of the precinct into the late afternoon sun, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt empty and incredibly sad. They had been so consumed by their greed and their pathological desire to hurt me that they had been willing to risk their own freedom. They had forced my hand, and now the consequences would be out of my control. The family drama had become a police matter, and I knew with a chilling certainty that this was the beginning of the end. The last few days leading up to the eviction deadline were filled with a tense, ominous silence. The harassing emails stopped. The unknown numbers stopped calling. It was the calm before the storm, a dead, heavy quiet that was more unsettling than their noise. I spent the time in a whirlwind of activity, finalizing the lease on a new condo and organizing the move, trying to focus on the future rather than the impending confrontation. The 30th day arrived. It was a gray, overcast Friday morning. The sky threatened rain. Mr. Pierce had arranged to meet me at the house at 1:00 a.m. to formally take possession. He had been adamant. "Do not go alone, Sophia. I will be there, and I have already coordinated with the local precinct. 2 sheriff's deputies will meet us there for backup." When I pulled onto my own street, a street I had lived on for 15 years, my heart was beating a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. I saw Mr. Pierce's black Mercedes parked behind a marked sheriff's cruiser. He was waiting for me on the sidewalk, his face grim, a leather briefcase in his hand. "They're still inside," he said quietly as I approached. They refused to open the door for the deputies. My stomach churned with a mix of fear and anger. I had foolishly hoped they would have simply left, that they would have packed their bags and slinked off into the night, leaving me to pick up the pieces in peace. Of course, they weren't going to make it that easy. The 2 deputies were professional and firm. They were large men, and their presence was both intimidating and deeply reassuring. The senior deputy banged on the heavy oak door one last time, his knuckles making a loud, authoritative thud. "Sheriff's Department." "Open the door." Silence. "All right," he said, turning to his partner. He used a breaching tool to force the lock, and the door popped open with a sharp crack. "Ma'am, Mr. Pierce, please stay behind us. We're going in." The first thing that hit me was the stench. A vile combination of stale cigarette smoke, rotting garbage, and cheap air freshener. The house, my beautiful immaculate house, was destroyed. The pristine oak floors were severely scratched and stained. There was trash everywhere. Greasy pizza boxes, empty wine bottles, overflowing trash bags piled in the corners. My beautiful silk drapes had been ripped from their rods. The plush gray modular sofa had a long, deliberate slash across the cushions, its white stuffing spilling out like intestines. The framed photos on the mantel had been swept off and smashed, the glass crunching under our feet as we walked. My life in silver frames shattered to pieces. And on the living room wall, right above the fireplace, written in what looked to be bright red lipstick, were the words, "Witch, Gold Digger." I felt a wave of dizziness and leaned against the doorframe for support. This wasn't just a mess. It was malice. It was a deliberate, hateful act of desecration. We found them in the master bedroom sitting on the edge of the bare mattress, which was also stained. They were surrounded by a few hastily packed duffel bags. They looked pathetic, defeated. Their expensive clothes were wrinkled, their faces pale and drawn. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a sullen, childish resentment. "You need to vacate the premises immediately," the senior deputy said, his voice booming in the trashed room. Jason just stared at the floor, refusing to look at me. But Chloe, my sister, looked up, her eyes filled with a pure, venomous hatred. "I hope you're happy, Sophia," she spat, her voice cracking. "You destroyed everything." "I didn't destroy anything, Chloe," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "I just turned on the lights." Just as the deputies were preparing to escort them out, there was a knock at the open front door. Two new figures appeared in the hallway. They were dressed in plain clothes, a man and a woman, and they held up gold shields and leather wallets. "Detectives," the man said, his eyes scanning the room. "We're here to speak with Jason Torres and Chloe Martin." A new kind of fear, cold, sharp, and entirely different from the fear of eviction, crossed Jason and Chloe's faces. This wasn't about the house anymore. The lead detective, who I recognized as Detective Mitchell from the precinct, addressed them. "We have a warrant to search the premises and seize any electronic devices. This is regarding an ongoing investigation into felony identity theft and wire fraud." Chloe burst into tears, a high, pitiful theatrical sound. Jason simply crumpled, as if all the bones had been removed from his body. He looked 20 years older. The detectives read them their Miranda rights, the familiar words from TV shows, now a chilling reality in my own bedroom. They put my husband and my sister in handcuffs and led them out of the house, marching them past the wreckage of the life we had once shared. Jason finally looked at me as he was led past. There was no anger in his eyes, only a hollow, empty despair. He knew it was all over. I stood there in the middle of my ruined home and watched them get put into the back of separate, unmarked police cars. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt an overwhelming, profound sense of quiet, blessed relief. The storm had finally passed. The house was a disaster. But it was my disaster. And it was finally silent. The months that followed were a painful, methodical process of cleaning up. There was the physical cleanup, which required a professional biohazard and property damage crew. It took weeks. There was the legal cleanup, which involved endless meetings with Mr. Pierce insurance adjusters and the district attorney's office. And then there was the emotional cleanup, the hardest part of all, which is still ongoing. The criminal case against them was a slam dunk. The detectives found the loan applications and a mountain of other incriminating evidence on Jason's laptop, which had been seized from the bedroom. Faced with irrefutable digital evidence, both he and Chloe took a plea deal to avoid a long public trial. They avoided jail time, a fact that initially infuriated me. But Mr. Pierce helped me see it differently. "A trial would have been a circus, Sophia," he said. "This is cleaner. And the consequences are still severe." He was right. They were sentenced to 5 years of probation. They were ordered to pay full restitution for the damages to the house. And they had to complete 500 hours of community service. They both now had felony records. Their professional and personal lives were in ruins. Jason was fired from his job. Chloe's nursing license was put under review by the state board. They became pariahs. The divorce was finalized quickly and quietly. Thanks to their criminal actions and the mountain of evidence of adultery and financial abuse, Jason walked away with nothing. The house, the savings, the investments, my 401k. It was all protected as my separate property and earnings. He left with his clothes, his debt, and his criminal record. The last I heard through a mutual acquaintance, he was living in a cheap rental across the river in New Jersey, working a low-level sales job pushing office supplies. Chloe's fate was, in some ways, even sadder. Our mother, finally forced to confront the ugly, undeniable truth, was devastated. She tried to support Chloe, but their already strained relationship fractured under the weight of the shame and disappointment. Chloe lost most of her friends, who were horrified by what she had done. She moved out of state to live with an aunt in the Midwest, trying to escape her ruined reputation. We haven't spoken a single word since the day she was arrested. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever hear from her again. As for me, I couldn't bear to stay in that house. I couldn't sleep in that bedroom or cook in that kitchen. It was tainted with too many bad memories stained by their betrayal. I had the professional crew restore it to its former beauty, every wall repainted, every floor refinished, and then I put it on the market. It sold in a week. With the proceeds, I bought a small, sun-drenched two-bedroom penthouse condo in a modern high-rise in the city. It has a terrace overlooking the park, and it is entirely mine. The day I moved in, carrying a single box of my most treasured belongings, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I spent weeks decorating it, not with things to impress other people, but with things that made me happy. I bought a ridiculously comfortable velvet armchair. I started an indoor herb garden. I signed up for a pottery class, something I had always wanted to do. My first creations were lopsided and ugly, but the feeling of the cold, wet clay spinning in my hands of creating something new from a lump of earth felt like a powerful metaphor for my own life. One day I was clearing out the last of the moving boxes, and I found them tucked away in the back of a storage closet. The expensive Italian leather suitcases I had bought Jason all those years ago, the ones I had used to pack my things on that terrible night. I stood there for a long time just looking at them, these symbols of a life and a love that had been a lie. I didn't hesitate. I dragged them down to the building's dumpster and threw them in one after the other. They made a satisfying thud when they hit the bottom. The next day I went out and bought myself a brand new set of luggage. It was lightweight, durable, and a beautiful, vibrant shade of sapphire blue. It was mine. My life is smaller now, and much quieter. But it is real. It is honest. And it is entirely my own. Last week I booked a trip. A solo trip. 2 weeks on the Amalfi Coast in Italy, something I have always dreamed of doing. I'm going to eat pasta, drink wine, sit by the sea, and read books. Sometimes late at night when the city is quiet, I still hear their laughter. I still remember Jason's smug, mocking question. "What are you gonna do? Divorce me?" He thought it was a threat. He thought it was the worst thing that could possibly happen to me. He had no idea that it would be the beginning of my salvation. He had no idea that I would do exactly that and so much more. I wouldn't just divorce him. I would dismantle the life he took for granted. I would hold him and my sister accountable for their crimes. And I would build a new life from the ashes, a life of my own, making one carefully chosen piece at a time. And that is my story. It was the hardest, most painful thing I've ever been through, but I came out the other side. If you have ever felt betrayed, if you have ever been made to feel small or foolish, I hope hearing this lets you know that you are not alone. And that you are much, much stronger than you think. Thank you for listening.